Good evening, everyone, or good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are. It's dark and it's cold here in Poland at 16 after 7, and I apologize for the late start. Um, Thunderous One had some technical difficulties. We had to take some time to fix those. And yeah, Rowan has not joined us yet, so I've had difficulty getting hold of him, but he might pop in a little bit later. So yeah, I'm here with Thunderous One, and we're back in the Thunder Room. So, Thunderous, welcome back.
Hey, how are you doing, Lloyd? Sorry, Rone's not here just yet. Hopefully, he'll join us in a little while, eh?
Yeah. So, yeah, we were
Just a
talking
little
about
while.
the UK last time. So, do you want to fill us in as to what's happening? Because I see that the chief of staff of the current UK president has resigned, and apparently there's lots of controversy. And the UK at the moment is, as we discussed, cracking down on Christians, giving sway to Muslims, and of course, yeah, I mean, at this point, Christians either have to be involved in politics or they're going to be sidelined by those who are not friendly to Christianity.
Yeah, I think if we recall the last time that we spoke, there'd been major upheavals in the United Kingdom, upheavals in a certain context that we'd seen police approach Muslims that were weaponized with weapons, tooled up as it were, and asked to leave their weapons in, of all places, mosques. We've seen developments as far as the definition of Islamophobia being brought into law. Whether that has actually been implemented as law yet, I don't know. We've seen a lot of protests that have been taking place in recent months with reference to Gaza and Free Palestine. The types of people that have joined into that march, for instance, the LGBTQ community and various others. When you look at Islam, those bodies of people or organizations wouldn't even exist. They would be totally devoured by the Islamic community or destroyed.
Right.
We've also seen the types of people that have been arrested and put in prison as well for various crimes, like putting wheeling bins in between themselves and the police, or shouting at police dogs, or making or using
Or
words.
saying who the F is Allah, because apparently
Yeah,
that's illegal in the UK and will get you sent to jail. I'm
yeah,
just curious because I saw the video of the policeman telling the Muslim protesters, let's call them protesters, that he would not have an issue if they took their weapons and put them in the mosque. Now,
yeah.
we know that in France, when police have had concerns with terrorism from Muslims, they would raid the mosques and find weapons in those mosques. Well, are Christian protesters allowed to leave their illegal weapons? Because in the UK, it's illegal to have those weapons, it's an immediate jail sentence. Are Christians allowed to leave their illegal weapons in their churches?
Well, the obvious answer to that is no, and I'd go one further. People are being arrested for praying outside clinics where abortions take place. So, and you'll find that that's not a Hindu praying, it's not a Jew praying, it wouldn't be a Muslim praying. That would be a silent prayer by somebody who identifies as a Christian. So, if you can't even think words inside your mind, it goes to show that that the mentality or the agenda or the end game seems to be something that anybody who upholds to the biblical narrative that is proactive in making a comment or enforcing something, or um, how can I say, acting upon their conscience, that their Bible trained conscience gives, or what the Bible trains their conscience to believe. If they act on that, that seems to be now a criminal offence, i.e., praying outside abortion clinics. So your comments about having weapons, I think we know the answer to that. If you can think words in your mind outside an abortion clinic, I think we know what the reaction would be from the police if you're caught with weapons, or if there are weapons found in a local church. Well, they're not even churches now anyway. They're community centres, aren't they? So
Nightclubs, rave
nightclubs.
centers.
So yeah, so that the interesting thing is, since that we've had the discussion with Roan and yourself a couple of weeks ago, Roan did go off and said he was arranging security for another march that was taking place since. And it's a shame. I'm hoping that he comes on because I had several questions I wanted to ask. But in the meantime, as far as the media is concerned over in the United Kingdom, it seems interesting that there hasn't been much in the way of media attention given to the marches and protests that have taken place since. If you consider the Manchester incident in the airport, there's pretty much radio silence on that. If you consider the men that had weapons who were advised to leave their weapons at the mosque, there's been radio silence on that. It seems to be anything that involves the religion of Islam, there seems to be radio silence on now, moving forward. So I found that it's not as if Islamic activity has suddenly stopped. I dare say, if anything, Islamic activity would embolden them more so, which is interesting because various YouTube channels have commented on Muhammad Hijab's recent opinion that the fight is actually with the Jews and the Christians, and also that Islam is a violent religion. It is something that it expands via conquest with the sword. And I think he alluded to quite strongly, not verbatim, but he alluded to, if you recall, the Asim Hakim, that where they'll have three options: you become Muslim, you pay the jizya, or you will have your head removed from the rest of your body.
But isn't that just a particular isolated interpretation of Islam? You know, it's not orthodox, not real Islam. You know, he's hijacked Islam, hasn't he?
Well, if he's hijacked Islam, he must have hijacked the Islam that was present when Muhammad was around. Because this is the only Islam that I think, you know, you and I, we've had this discussion for many years. The only Islam that's been hijacked is the grass that hides the snake Islam. That is to say, if violent Islam is the snake that hides in the grass, then the passive Islam is the grass that hides the snake, and we both know that that's how it works. But I found it was interesting that he would be so proactive in making this comment to people, in light of, because he would be aware, as many Muslim YouTubers would be, that various people have commented on the Asim al-Hakim three options, though he put that as something that would be further into the future. Muhammad Hijab's dialogue seemed to imply something a little bit more imminent, or within a certain, within a few years, if you like. And done with immunity and impunity.
Yeah, if I can just show the audience a couple of things. So I have an X account. Let me just start that running. And oddly enough, John Cena started following me on X a few days ago. So that was one of the biggest surprises of my life, that John Cena of WWE fame, you can't see me, started to follow me on X. But on my account, I do lots of posts, and I try to make Twitter threads with historical information, so things that are bite-sized and useful to you. So, for instance, Islam, should be aware, is a colonial movement. It expanded through warfare, colonizing Arabia, the Levant, North Africa, Europe, and Asia. And Islamic migration is called the hijrah, right? A form of jihad that earns reward from Allah. It is so important in Islam that it marked year zero of the Islamic calendar. So migration is a religious duty and a religious act so important in Islam, it marked year zero. In the Christian calendar, the birth of Jesus is year zero. In the Islamic calendar, migration through the sword or through small boats across the English Channel marked year zero in their calendar. And it symbolizes the establishment of an Islamic state. So having spread Islam and imposed it by migration, this is incredibly important. So jihad has multiple forms, including migration, which is, in this case, hijrah, for the sake of establishing Islam. And it's an act of striving, a form of jihad. So for instance, and this is in my, let me just grab this link. I will drop this link to this book. It's in my archive. I've dropped it here in the chat. And this is called the Atlas of the Islamic Conquests. And notice the Muslim conquests is called the periodic golden history of Islamic conquest. They're not ashamed of their colonial past. They will make Europeans and Americans ashamed of their slave past, their colonial past. You colonialists. Islam calls their colonial past a golden history of conquest. Maybe you need to, as foreigners who are not Muslims, say, our colonial history, our conquests are a golden period of conquest that we're very proud of. Notice, from the Caliphate of Abu Bakr to the height of the Ottoman Caliphate, from Central Asia to Morocco, Spain, and Central Europe. Spain was invaded in the 600s. France was invaded in the late 600s, early 700s. Now, one has to ask, what were the Muslims doing invading France in the 700s? What were they doing invading Spain in the 600s? What did the Spanish and the French do to them? I'll pause there. So, guys, please check the links, download these, use this information. I have many, many such tweets and threads that are very small, bite-sized, useful pieces of information. Please use them. Back to you, Thunderous.
Yeah, so it's interesting that we've had very limited exposure to what's taking place in Muslim communities in the United Kingdom. I think it's quite interesting considering the events on the world scene since the last time that we spoke. Now, since the last time we spoke with Roan about 3 weeks ago, we've had pagers going off and maiming, if not killing people. The very next day, we've had walkie-talkies exploding, maiming, if not killing people.
Right.
The day after that, we've had Lebanon have some bombs released from Israel over into Lebanon. Since then, we've also had Iran respond with their own missile attacks as an act of revenge, which is interesting because that in itself, we've been listening to that on mainstream media taking place, and there have been various interviews on that. But from the Muslim community, there's not been much in the way of response. And I would have expected, because the nation of Israel have expanded their military operations, both north and south, and particularly I don't know how somebody would describe it, ingenious, would you say, exploding
That
pages.
was certainly unexpected, and I think it shows the patience, the cunning, the technological sophistication of Mossad. I mean, one very interesting fact that came out recently was that there's a division of the Secret Service in Iran that is dedicated to Israel, and that the leader of that organization and at least 20 of his people were actually Mossad spies. So, yeah, and they were responsible for assassinations of various Iranian leaders, disruptions, theft of data and such. So, I mean, it just shows that Israel has been very busy.
Yeah, and I found it quite interesting that within a relative short period of time, certain major players within, say, Hamas or Hezbollah or in Iran have actually been taken out, as it were, with quite precise, with using precise means to do so. And within a relative short period of time, I think Nasrallah was one that was taken out, and then somebody who would the next, if you like, Hydra head that appeared was taken out as well within a limited period of time. So these things are taking place, but there doesn't seem to be much in the way of response from any voices within the Islamic community, though. That being said, there was a protest, or a march rather, this week in London, the usual free Palestine, as it were. And the only imagery that I saw of that was the usual, the police allowing the pro-Palestine march to behave with immunity and impunity, whilst those that were against having placards of Hamas are terrorists were the ones where the police were paying the most attention. So other than that, since our last conversation, there hasn't been much in the way of media coverage, as far as I'm concerned, or Islamic reaction. Certainly, if there is an Islamic reaction, it's not something that's taken or being advertised in the media at the moment. So make of that what you will. I do believe that the government and the media are one of the mainstream media are one and the same. One's just the PR side of the other, and I think there's a deliberate manipulation of whatever information is put up for the public's consumption.
Yeah, I just have to wonder why the US government as well as the British government kowtows so much to the Islamic lobby. And when you look at the influence of Qatar, that is spending billions of dollars to influence universities, to influence education in the West, people are not talking about the enormous amount of money that they're spending, how much influence and control they have, and talking about this lobby that, and also why the West is so afraid of offending Muslims if there is nothing to fear from this particular religious demographic.
Well, that goes back to yet again, and I think the audience are probably fed up of me saying exactly the same thing because it tends to repeat itself when we have this discussion about the fear
Yeah.
factor of Islam. And that is that if you go back to Salman Rushdie, if you make a comment about Muhammad, blood has to be spilt. So it's the same way with the media and anything that the investments. I mean, I know you did an excellent show, I think it was last year before, about Islamic Arab money going into the education system and in effect directing that particular university or college into what it will or will not tolerate as far as student protest is concerned. So if you want investments, you're going to pretty much go in the line with where your investor wants the direction to go in, as it were. So that comes as no surprise because in effect you're selling your soul, aren't you, to the dollar, and your controller would not want you to. And you yourself probably wouldn't want to react in a way that kills the goose because you want the
Yeah.
egg to be continually provided for you. So that
Actually,
comes
now
as
that
no
you
surprise.
mentioned this, let me just give people a brief update on this. This is my presentation called the Islamic Lobby, right? Which is almost invisible, barely known in the West. It is extremely powerful. It is extremely wealthy based off of oil and gas money. And it undermines US interests. It influences foreign and domestic policy. It wants the destruction of Israel. And it spends billions to use, it uses billions of these petrodollars to do dawah on universities. And it promotes the demonizations of Jews. And of course, it undermines the constitution to promote Sharia and Islam. Now remember, Muslims have a saying, do not let your enemy know he's your enemy, right? So let me talk about this for a moment. Um, so we have this idea there's an all-powerful Israeli lobby. Now, if you just follow the money, which is an age-old strategy, when you follow the money, you'll find that the Muslim lobby spends 60, 70, 80 times more money than Israel can even afford. It spends untold amounts of money that we barely know about. Now, let me mention here. Okay, with Islam, now this is a couple of years old. Since 9/11, there have been over 41,000 recorded Islamic Jihad terror attacks. In 2021, 53 countries had over 2,250 attacks, murdering 11,187 people, injuring nearly 10,000. In 2020, there were attacks in 54 countries with over 2,000 attacks, murdering over 10,000 people. Right? These numbers of attacks are growing. Right? Now, you're looking at 105,000 terrorist murders in 15,000 jihad attacks since 2015 alone. That's in the 6 years up to 2021. Right? Now, let's see. The Arab lobby has no visible public HQ like APAC, so it operates by stealth. Right? And let me mention something here. Hmm. Okay, so 74, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General George Brown, attacks the Jewish lobby and Jewish ownerships of banks and newspapers. Thomas McIntyre, right, Democrat, says reflects the will of a strong majority of Americans. So Israeli support is endemic or is very much a fixture of American life because of the Holy Land. So they like Israel. They like Israelis. So they like this. But the influence of big oil, he said, is far more insidious, far more pervasive than the influence of the Jewish lobby. For oil and influence seep across ideological as well as party lines without public approval or support. He said the Jewish lobby is not in the same league with the general's own lobby, the Pentagon, and the defense establishment. And there's one slide that I'm looking for that I just need to find that. And the Arab lobby is older than the Israeli lobby. It started with the Arab National League of America in the 1930s. In 1951, King Saud of Saudi Arabia asked US officials to finance a pro-Arab lobby to counter the pro-Israel lobby. The CIA obliged. Arab lobbies is 21 Islamic states plus Palestine, which is Saudi dominated. Let me continue and just find the stats. So Israel, in terms of military aid, it has peace treaties with only two of its neighbors. Technically, it is at war with the rest of the Arab Islamic world. Iran is openly hostile, as we know, and Israel has to maintain a very strong defense. It is outmanned, outgunned, and relies on a qualitative advantage, so technology. There is roughly 177,000 active Israeli troops versus a combined 2.36 million Islamic troops. That's about double, right? Am I counting that correctly?
You're absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, at least double, right? I mean, I'm using African maths here, but I think it's about that. So new weapon systems are expensive. Israel cannot afford them on its own. So aid from the US is vital. Now, Israel's enemies have numerous suppliers, but Israel relies almost entirely on the United States. A little bit from the UK, but that's been cut, as well as France, and that's been cut. There's a genocidal agenda to destroy the US-Israel relationship. I'll pause there. Any thoughts from you?
No, there were two thoughts that came up. While you particularly go through the figures of the jihad attacks and the people murdered, I would probably increase those figures maybe by 5 or 10% respectively for each year, because you and I both know that because of the nature of these attacks and the PR machine that's been put into place, as you've said, because universities, the media have been influenced by the petrodollar, that some of these attacks get put down as being people with mental illnesses. So they're not Islamic attacks, these are mental illness attacks. Or they're disguised as Asian attacks. They're not necessarily Muslim. So if you think about crimes, I'm using this as an example, the Muslim grooming gangs, the Pakistani Muslim grooming gangs in the United Kingdom, initially when they were released and found and the media got hold of something that they had to eventually relent to and advertise, they didn't put it down as Pakistani Muslim or Islamic grooming gangs. They put it down as Asian gangs. So you can easily add 5 or 10% to the figures you provided, Lloyd, because they would use different words to describe different crimes, as we know is taking place. And just moving forward on to the other point that you raised about the pro-Israeli lobby in America. You can imagine that a lot of people's sentiment is towards Israel for two reasons. One, America is predominantly, or claims to be, a Bible-based country. It even has a phrase, the Bible Belt. So there would be an inclination of people who follow the biblical narrative to support Israel, considering this is the birthplace of Jesus. But also at the same time that there could well be an eschatological reason why many Christians would side with Israel, because they may well feel from the point of view of eschatology that Israel still has an outworking purpose as far as God's purpose is concerned. So there's still a connection, in their opinion or estimation, that Israel still has that God still has a plan for Israel, hence their support.
Right. So notice people talk about AIPAC, right? So, I mean, this discussion with Thunderous has been, I think, sort of around social issues as well, cultural and political issues. And I think as Christians, as people who are patriotic, love the West, love our culture, love our religion, we need to be aware of what's happening in the world, and we need to be able to respond. We need to be able to apply our principles to the situations we're dealing with. Now, for instance, the Arab lobby. You get a lot of slander and smear of AIPAC, but let's have a few facts. AIPAC is domestic money raised by American Jews and American Christians. It includes Christian refugees from Lebanon who understand the Islamic threat and agenda, who all support Israel. It is not money that is given by Israel to bribe American politicians. It is support from US citizens to declare their support, their desire to support Israel. So reasons include, as Thunderous stated, religious and biblical heritage, family heritage, and direct knowledge of the threat to Israel by the Arab countries. Streamlabs, I see. Okay, fine. Villainous, I understand. Streamlabs, I need to disable that. Let me try and get on that right now. I see my Streamlabs bot is getting a little zealous. I'll try and fix that right now. Over to you, Thunderous.
Yeah, so I forgot what my point was going to be. So just with what you're saying there as an example, if we had to apply that in the United Kingdom at the moment, I think you can certainly look at something like why on earth would you need a definition for Islamophobia? Islamophobia as a word is a misnomer, a portmanteau, or a conflation at best, or a Franken word. So it's not even a mental condition. It's just a creative pejorative to stifle criticism and argument, or exposing the nature of the ideology. But now that you're trying to implement it as a law that if you attack anything Muslim, then that to me is a serious concern. And one has to think, well, what is the end game agenda, or where is the motive or the backing or the encouragement for this to be taking place? And it's interesting that within the last couple of weeks, rather, that Lord Ali has been linked having a very close relationship to the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer, with clothes being bought by Lord Ali for both Keir Starmer and his wife, and various other things as well. So there's clearly
someone who lets another man buy clothes for his wife.
That in itself, you have to ask serious questions as to what's going on there. It's not for us to maybe speculate on, but it is just in itself what you said there. Who on earth buys clothes for another man's wife? That to me raises a lot of questions, but we'll just leave it at that. But the fact that there is a connection, a Muslim connection with Lord Ali, who was made a lord by the previous Labour leader, Tony Blair. So seems to be a very tight, close connection between the Islamic community or certain established members of the Muslim community and the Labour Party. And now we're seeing, is it David Gove or Michael Gove, I forget what the name is, who's trying to implement the definition of Islamophobia, which under the recent definition was attacking or criticizing anything, or perceived criticism of anything that is of Muslimness, which is quite a nebulous word, Muslimness. But the thing is, what it does, as we've discussed previously, it empowers the Muslim community to operate with immunity and impunity, because if you start quoting the Quran or the Islamic agenda as Muhammad Hijab has done, and you're critical of that, then that would be an attack or a perceived attack or something that is Muslimness. That can then extend to how many wives can a Muslim have. If he wants 2, 3, or 4, as his religion prescribes, and you critical of that, that could be a perceived attack of something that is Islamophobic because you're attacking Muslimness. Then when you start going down that road, where do you draw the line with not just the number of wives that you have, but also the ages of the wives that you have as well? Because that could also be an Islamophobic attack, or something that's perceived as attacking Muslimness. So there seems to be something, uncomfortable driving this forward. And fundamentally, human beings are not stupid. The people in England are not stupid. British people, English people are not stupid. So when they see these things, they know what's going on. But we've got a system now in England where being critical of these things, is more dangerous than the thing that you're being critical of. And that, I find that very absurd and concerning, that this is allowed to take place, because while it is taking place, it's strangling, almost like mentally and emotionally, psychologically, the people of the indigenous of the country, because if your own government is acting this way towards you,
Mm.
where do you effectively go from here? There's nowhere else to
See,
go, is there?
it's
When your own
incredible.
go.
No, that Islam has no popular support in the sense that they have to force it upon you through
Yeah.
legislation, through coercion, through bribery, effectively, right? Because it has no popular support, and they are lobbying and paying decision makers. And I mean, as we know, they have been propagandizing the educational system in the US. I mean, they have these mosque visits now, of course, in the UK, where people go to mosques, and but they send them to churches. I mean, they send kids from school to mosque to pray, to learn about other cultures. But do they send them to churches? And do they teach them to pray there too? They have halal meals in the schools. Do they
Yeah.
have Christian holy days? You know, they with those meals, there's definitely a double standard.
Yeah, and I think the commercial world doesn't help in this either. I think places like Kentucky Fried Chicken, I think it happens in Canada, where all their Kentucky Fried Chickens now serve halal chicken. So, but you can see that would be something that would be incorporated by other fast food companies moving forward, because the attitude is that, well, if we start serving halal chicken, that's going to draw in the Muslim community as far as the customer base, or expand on their customer base is concerned. But their attitude is, well, so what to the Jews, the Christians, the atheists, and such, because it doesn't bother them anyway. But what they don't seem to realize is, or maybe they do, is that all it does is, yet again, it empowers Islam. And it almost, from a Muslim point of view, if you're brought up in the Muslim community, your perception is going to be, we're seeing all this expansion of Islam without the sword, but with influence, with threats, and with money. That their perception would be, what do you think, Lloyd? Who do you think they think is behind this movement and the expansion of Islam in such means? Where do you think that what do you think is going to galvanize them?
Sorry, I just kind of missed the question because I'm trying to, but just I missed the first part. But I got just run that past me again for a moment.
So, with everything that we're seeing in the world today, for instance, fast food chains now
Oh,
catering to the Islamic community by serving halal meat.
oh
When
wow.
you're looking at things like words being defined now in favor of the Muslim community, when you find that you can pretty much say what your views are in the media as far as being a Muslim is concerned, and with Muslim endgame agenda, and you can say that pretty much freely without any recourse as far as the legal system is concerned. From the Muslim point of view, and I can go on, but from the Muslim point of view, who do you think they think all this is coming from? Where do you think their blessing is? That this all this blessing is coming from? Who do you think they think their source is?
I mean, like the Muslims, do they think they're getting supported by Allah when they get all of these
There's the
benefits?
point. Exactly. They'll just say Allahu Akbar is the will of Allah. You know, praise be to Allah. It just galvanizes them even more so, because
Yeah.
they're not in their own indigenous lands, they're in foreign lands, and even if they're born into, say, France, England, Germany, whatever, the ideology is foreign. Okay, so all it does, it sort of reinforces their mindset that Islam must be the truth, because we're seeing so many gains in the world, in the country that we're in, that
Hmm.
is causing, that we know is causing a problem for the people who are Jew, Christian, atheist, agnostic. But we're the ones being strengthened by this. So this can only be from Allah. Only Allah can create these kind of victories.
Well, that's on that point. Couple of things. FM Knight says here Christians should not eat halal food. It's animal sacrificed, which Christ banned, and I think there's a case for that. I
I
don't really know. Yeah.
No, there's a scripture in Corinthians where it talks about if you can or can't eat meat sacrificed to an idol. I think it's in Corinthians, but I can put it in the show notes later, where you can actually, it's down to conscience. So the Apostle Paul made it clear you can actually eat the meat, but it's down to your conscience if you eat it or not.
Well, I'd just like to mention on this point. Thanks for that. Someone recently on the channel was very upset. They were saying, well, if it weren't for factory farming, and how terribly Westerners treat these animals. People would not go to the Muslims and use halal as an option, as an alternative, as a better alternative. I mean, halal is brutal. It is a brutal way of killing an animal. It is a painful way of killing animals. Now, here's an idea. Just connect a couple of dots together. You get this people trying to save the world, so you have to move to green energy. And the next thing you know, Germany slips out of the top 20 wealthiest countries in the world and starts to deindustrialize. And they're trying to take away your electricity, and they're trying to, you will own nothing and be happy, and etc. These things are a slippery slope. Now, there was a few years ago, you might recall, there was a massive campaign against factory farming, which gave the impression that farms are bad, farming is bad, farmers are bad, meat is bad, eating meat is bad, everything to do with chickens is bad, chickens suffer, animals suffer, you're bad because you make the chicken suffer, you're immoral, right? This might represent a certain portion of the American, let's say, the industry, or the worldwide Western food industry. It is not the entire industry. But however, this negative stereotype influenced people's perception of all farming, of all farmers, of all ways of producing food. So this argument I think this woman made to me is false. But notice we went from farmers are bad to last year the massive riots and protests, because even like in Holland, they want to close all the farms. They want to shut down 50% of farms because farming is bad. Farming is killing the world. And we need to take this farmland and we need to plant forests because you need to starve. And we also need to degrowth and deindustrialize. And also, migrants need that land. We need to build houses for all of these new Europeans and these new Dutch people that are coming in. So notice you go from factory farming, which is used to slander all farmers, all farming practices, all eating of meat, and suddenly, you have to cancel farming. Farming is bad, and you can't afford meat anymore. And this is a very slippery slope. That's just someone being taken in by a political message that has an agenda, and the next thing you know, slippery slope. Your thoughts, Thunderous?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked me for my thoughts, because I think the catalyst in that argument was actually climate change, because the suggestion was that meat production and battery farming and such is related to methane from the cows that gets put into the atmosphere. So the argument is that if you reduce down the amount of meat consumption that takes place within society, then in effect what you're doing is reducing down the amount of methane that's produced, and therefore it's going to have a positive effects on the climate. And I think it's just one of those arguments. It's very much interlinked with so many things, but there is an end game agenda, and climate change will be the narrative that's controlling that argument. The interesting thing is with what you mentioned with Holland and the farmers and things. Yeah, that's sadly quite real as well and ongoing. I think with that, and I think it's something that I mentioned several weeks ago in one of our shows about, Eisenhower made the comments about the military industrial complex. But I think we're living in a world today where it's more like we're getting into the situation of the banking industrial complex, the pharmaceutical industrial complex, the food production industrial complexes, which are the big players behind the political world that we're living in at the moment. So one has to really scrutinize when we're hearing something in the media about certain things about how human beings are living in and their lifestyles, is to maybe think between the line and go beyond the headline and think, what is the end game strategy in this headline?
Yeah, notice here, they're now introducing 3D printed meat.
Yeah.
And this is disgusting. So, I mean, this is 3D printed with inks and stem cells. And yeah, this is Franken food.
I think, to be honest with you, and I know I've said this many a time, that when you're looking at something that's going on in the world today, you do really have to look at the biblical narrative and question how does this challenge the biblical narrative. God said to Adam and Eve when they were made, eat from every tree to satisfaction. Okay. When Noah came off the ark, that's when the prescription was given to eat meat. Okay, but within the confines of just eating meat, not not hunt animals for sport. It's almost like what they're when I see things like this, I see it as a challenge on God's sovereignty, that whatever God has said in the Bible, you're going to try and counter that with an alternative that you think is basically saying, well, the Bible's wrong on this, we can do better than what the God is in the Bible is saying. For instance, we've said this before, God said in the beginning, he created the male and female. Now we're living in a world today where you're not male or female. You don't let your XY or XX chromosomes define what you are. You can define yourself. Even if you want to identify as a cat, you can identify as a cat. Don't let your species identify you. God said he saw the embryo of me. No, it's not an embryo, it's a fetus. Though the reality is fetus is just another word for offspring. But
Right.
have an abortion. So you can see there are certain things that are a direct attack on the God of the Bible, and I see this fruit production and everything as a deliberate attack. Because what they're also implying is that, well, that food that we see growing naturally without pesticides and things like that, we can do better. Well, that God that you've got there that's provided this food, well, we can make it last longer than the food he provided, and we can make it taste better. So it's almost like challenging what he's done as far as creation is concerned with an alternative creation.
It's interesting that during the Exodus, the manna that was sent down, they were to eat it, and what they didn't use, they had to discard because
Yeah,
they would get fresh sustenance the next day, and the manna would actually stink if they
yeah.
kept it, if the Jews kept it. So I mean, I don't know if that's something that tells us that we should, keep food at least as close to sort of real as possible without trying to play with it, and it
But
should be abundant that week.
I think the interesting things when you look at immigration, particularly from the African and Indian continents, is that people over in Africa and India eat food, in my estimation, from what I've seen historically, that's as near to real as it can possibly be, or
Right,
still live. So they'll pull an apple from a tree and they'll eat it while it's still live. I'm a supermarket snob and I shop at Waitrose. I can assure you, when I'm going to go and get my apple or my bag of Brayburn apples, it's been sitting on a shelf for probably about a week. It's probably come from another country. So I would say it's probably been pulled from the plant about 6 weeks previous, if not longer, being treated with various kind of chemicals to keep it preserved in its appearance before the time I get to put it in my mouth and start taking bites and digesting it. So I think there's a lot
right,
to be said about people's health in in the Western world, with going back to what I said earlier and the industrial food complex, in
right.
comparison to what you're saying about the manna. Because I worked, one of my first jobs when I was young, as a 13-year-old boy, was actually to work in the fruit and veg shop, and you had to sell the tomatoes within a couple of days, otherwise they'd go soft and rotten, like with the
Right,
lot. Like what you just said there about the manna kind of reminded me of it. But
right,
now we're living in a world where waste is a waste of food is a waste of profit,
right. Yeah, I
and
want
that
to say thank you to Harry Tecklenburg for the donation. Much appreciated. Thank you. Um, yeah, yeah. I want to just jump back to a comment. Muslims have no money, no power. That's a common argument, and you'll find this covered in my series, the Arab Lobby or the Muslim Lobby. And this is what the senator told us back then. Let me just open this up again. He said, in 2017, they contacted every single senator, as well as those who are on the appropriations committees, the foreign affairs committees, and the armed services committees multiple times. Those who are directly making the decisions about whether or not arms deals, multi-billion-dollar arms deals, are going to go through with the government. Don't think that this is restricted purely to just arms sales. But the other side of it is a massive public relations campaign, and that's very much focused on pushing Saudi Arabia's quote unquote reform agenda and portraying them as a valuable ally within the Middle East. Part of that reform agenda is, well, we're going to reform Islam. We're going to throw out those hadiths. We're going to make Islam all nice. And you know what? It's so nice because it's this new neutered form of Islam. You should really let this Trojan horse into your society, because at some point we're going to send an imam who's going to say, okay, guys, let's stop faking it. It's time to follow the rules in this book. And that's probably what they're doing.
have you not noticed that with Mohammed bin Saud, that there is supposed to be this reform of Saudi Arabia and Islam? What do you think lead you to believe that the narrative that we're getting, that this is the direction he wants to take his Saudi Arabia in, may not necessarily be true? What kind of clues do you have that makes you think that I question this narrative? I
He
just want
doesn't
to
have
see.
orthodoxy on his side. He doesn't have the scripture on his side. He doesn't have the canonical text on his side.
Yeah, and also if you notice that if he is taking things in that direction in Saudi Arabia, I've not heard any imam or scholar say anything about it, because it would be at least considered some kind of heresy or apostasy, and nothing has been said by anybody. That to me as well, that the fact that he's not being criticized internally from their highest scholars leads me to believe that this is all a bit suspect.
Just to bring up a couple of points. So this is Alan Dershowitz, known as a leftist, known as a Democrat, right? He says the Arab lobby is one of the strongest in America, even stronger than Israel's, in his book, right? And this is the Saudi lobbying machine in Washington. And there's one really interesting, right? So they have an army of lobbyists for Saudi, but it's not just Saudi. There's other competition as well. And there's one that even asks about how did Saudi buy the US government? So Saudis used incentives and threats to shut down the US investigation in Yemen. No Jews, no news, right? Foreign influence operations. So this US influence machine, so foreign influence, these guys are incredibly influential. They are very, very influential. They have friends in very high places. I mean, when you've got George Bush and some Arab kissing each other, yeah, you would think maybe they're a little bit close to each other. You know, it could be something going on there. So yeah, there's a heck of a lot that's going on with like this one. Why is there so much Saudi money in American universities? Well, there's Qatari money as well. And yeah, yeah. Back to you, Thunderous.
Yeah, so since the last time the three of us got together with Roan, that's yourself, myself, and Roan, there hasn't really been much going on in England, which is interesting considering what has been taking place in the Middle East, which I find intriguing to say the least. But other than that, I think the only thing that's been going that I found of interest was our favourite friend, Richard Dawkins, identifying as a cultural Christian. I thought that was quite interesting why he would
You mean
come
as an
out.
Islamophobe? Is that what you're trying to say? He
Well,
decided he didn't like Islam very much. He liked Christianity more, even though he hates Christianity.
yeah, which I found quite bizarre that he would come out and say that. But then I'm beginning to think that if you go back to when we first met, and I made the comment that all of this kind of perversity that we're seeing in society is a direct byproduct of Darwinian evolution and atheism, because the thing is with people who follow, no, irrespective of what their ideological perception is as to what religion they identify with or what narrative they identify with, there is a line, as it were, of objective moral values that they can't cross or shouldn't cross. However, with Darwinian evolution and atheism, there is no line, and I think with people like Richard Dawkins now, it's becoming very, very obvious and very apparent that that when you have no objective moral values, then pretty much anything goes. And I think he's trying to remove himself from the influence that he's had in contributing to the absolute toxic decay of the society that we're seeing in England at the moment, and by extension, probably other places in Europe and America. That the Christopher Hitchens, the Aaron Ra's, and so on. I would even include the apostate prophet in there, as well as Harris Sultan, Nuria the Light. All these people who identify as atheists have been either directly contributing to the toxic decay of society, or have at least given it its tacit support. One, by communal responsibility, which is identifying as an atheist, or not being critical of the ideology that they adhere to, that has actually contributed to these things that are taking place today.
Yeah, you do know that Aaron Ra came out as a Satanist, right? He made a statement, a blunt statement, that he has come out as a follower of Satan. So that was,
Do you think he was being sarcastic with that? Because I know
no,
he's done a book
no.
recently with that we are humans are. I paraphrase the title of the book, but it's something like humans are still apes, basically. And I know he did a video recently challenging basically Dr. James Tour and the other Origin of Life challengers, that origin of life via natural processes and chemical reaction is actually possible.
I've heard him argue, and I don't find him credible. I don't find him persuasive.
No.
So, no.
No, so I found that quite interesting about Richard Dawkins. Why do you think Richard Dawkins has decided to identify as a cultural Christian?
He sees that British culture is changing, society is changing, it's devolving, it's becoming more aggressive, more violent, it's less recognizably English, it's less recognizably Western, and those cultural values are derived from Christianity.
Yeah.
The law is derived from Christian morality. It's so the law follows a certain principle of truth and of justice. God is justice, God is truth. The law tries to follow that principle, even if it doesn't do so perfectly. But now we're following a foreign model that is antithetical to Western thinking, to Western culture and practice. And it is following a much more pagan, much more primitive, brutal, and violent concept. I think he's seeing that the dignity of people who are locals, who are born in the country, people who are indigenous, patriots, white people, are being demeaned, sidelined, they are being marginalized, they are being humiliated, and they are being made into second-class citizens in their own country. Now, he may not be able to say all that, but you find that the government is now preferring outsiders. It is implementing ideas that are antithetical to Christianity, because communism slash socialism is antithetical to Christianity. It is a replacement religion, and it is aligning with all the enemies of Christianity. I think he's smart enough to see that. However, I think he's also blind to the fact that he has been, as you said, party to the destruction of Christianity by
Yeah.
undermining it. However, you can't have bread rolls if you throw out the oven, and Christianity is the oven, and he wants the bread rolls, but he doesn't want to keep the oven because he wants to go back to, I don't know, atheist campfires or something, or whatever. But if you get the analogy.
No, everything you've said there is a bang on point as well. It's just that I would probably add on there that because they've got no red line, they've got no objective moral values, and when you've allowed society to develop by criticizing, mocking, and humiliating religion, even writing books called The God Delusion, it's lent itself to people being more sort of, I'll go with what my emotions lead me into, rather than what may make logical or intellectual sense. For instance, just the whole transgender movement isn't born out of any theistic ideology, nor will it be supported by a theistic ideology. It is purely born out of a Marxist movement that is atheist in its origins, and has a scientific basis in Darwinian evolution. But now that we've seen this move forward, we've seen children that were mutilated or via castration or double mastectomies or receiving hormone suppressants. That is a direct product of Darwinian evolution and atheism.
So that's natural evolution. Going to a surgeon, having surgery, taking hormones, getting injections, using scalpels. That is evolutionary. That's purely organic.
You know, yeah, it's eugenics as well, isn't it? Which is born from Darwinian evolution, or should I say, a part of that old bank of us, as well as is it Alfred Kinsey? I forget what his name is. I've got the video on my channel, which is the exploitation of children sexually at a very young age. So, you know, there's a lot to be said. But moving with what he was saying, I found it kind of bizarre. A man who has been critical of objective theistic moral values, yet has been married several times, and you have to ask the question: well, if you're against God, why is it you went and got married? That's a religious. It originates the whole marriage institution. It was born out of a God. It's his requirement that a man and woman get married. So if you don't believe in a God, why did you go and get married? And not only have you done it once, not only have you done it twice, you've done it 3 times, dude. You know,
Yeah, I mean,
you got your
yeah,
trifecta of
marriage as
marriages.
such is a Christian institution, as a religious institution with a sanction from God, with divine sanction. Whereas you can have a public marriage endorsed by the state, recognized as legal by the state. But why do you have to co-opt the Christian concept? Why do you have to? I mean, well, think of this. I've said this before. Gay people can't have their own children. Two men cannot have children. Two women cannot have their own children. So what do they have to do? They have to steal yours.
Yeah,
They have to co-opt your children to their lifestyle. We know back in the 80s and 90s, there was the whole craze um, about conversion therapy. You can't do that because you're born gay. Now you're not born that way. You are fluid, and previously it was genetic. Now it's no, it's a feeling. You see, I can change gender every day. And none of this makes any sense. These are atheists, these scientific, rational atheists who are talking the most ascientific, unhistorical, unhinged, total poop. And of course, conversion therapy is bad unless you're trying to turn the kids gay. Unless you want to turn the 3-year-old into a gay child that you can groom, then it's okay. But if you're trying to make a gay man into a straight man, oh no, that is if you. But if you want to cut off a 12-year-old girl's breasts, well, that's okay. If you want to cut off a 14-year-old boy's pee-pee, that's fine too. But if you want to make a lesbian into a straight woman, that's a sin. That is
yeah,
disgusting.
yeah,
You low life. I
yeah.
think that's utterly hypocritical, and it's satanic. It's evil.
Yeah, I mean, you can add abortions in there as well. It's okay to have an abortion, but it's wrong to challenge a child of 4 years old, to challenge a child of 4 years old when they decide that as a child that they can determine what sex they are, and there's and their and that 4-year-old child's subjective worldview actually overrides their parents.
Yeah.
And
No, I mean, this is. I mean, when you said, "Shh, don't tell your parents," that was go straight to jail. Don't pass go. Don't collect $200. Go straight to jail. When someone said that, now, shh, don't tell your parents is what every school teacher is telling kids.
It's interesting, just as a conclusion on this, that the one of the doctors at the Tavistock Institute was recently caught by one. I don't know if you have them in Poland, but in England we have like a vigilante group who use social media to entrap people who are inclined to want to have relationships with children. I think they're grooming gang. I don't know what the technical name is for these type of people, but they basically entrap pedophiles by setting up
Yes.
fake accounts and things and then trapping them.
Yeah.
And recently, a doctor from the Tavistock Institute was caught
Well,
grooming a 50-year-old boy and went to meet him in a park in order to for a pre-arranged meeting to have sex. And this is one of the doctors at the Tavistock Institute, and all he got was a suspended sentence over a year. So really when you're looking at the England at the moment and this judicial system, we are seeing people now that are downloaded child, and Hugh Edwards was just the latest person, but there's been many who have downloaded child abuse images, and his was category A as well, which is probably the worst type, which is the
yeah.
abuse of physical abuse of children with violence and possibly
Yeah.
worse. And this doctor and just getting suspended sentence now. It seems
Suspended,
that
of course. But this has been this, I've read this in the UK. So many people who've been guilty of making PDFs,
yeah,
okay, get suspended sentences, and people who send mean tweets or shout at police dogs go to jail for 2 years with 2 days worth of deliberations between the offense and jailing. It's insane. And yeah, I mean, there's clearly pedophiles running the UK judicial system. I just want to mention Artsy Fartsy raises a very, very good point here. The same people who complain about circumcision for religious purposes are all for doing major surgery, circumcision, if you will, on boys and girls to for religious purposes. Let's just put it that way. Are you there, Thunderous?
So yeah. I don't know. You seem to have broken up there for a moment. Yeah, I did read that what you were saying there. I mean, this is just the duplicitous nature of the illogical arguments and the cognitive dissonance that these people go through when making their arguments about, like you say, they're quite happy with mastectomies and mutilations and turning boys into eunuchs, but chopping off a piece of skin for religious purposes is like a heresy or child abuse. But that's just the world. Yet again, that's another attack on theocracy. Going to my point, where anything that's contained within a religious text is attacked.
Right.
But their behavior is worse, but it's done with immunity and impunity.
Right. And of course, villainous, and there was another comment below that you've got almost no gays, and now you've got 20-25% or whatever, and this is just social contagion. This is merely an infection of irrationality. It's been pushed through social media, it's been pushed through the news, it's been normalized, and this is insanity that is being normalized. And yeah, I want to change gears just briefly and bring up something else. Since we're talking about the evils of social media, hopefully I can use social media for something positive. As I mentioned, I do social media posts and I try to take topics that are controversial or important topics and try to make these short tweet threads. So if you guys can follow or just go to my X channel, use this. These are bite-sized pieces. I want to speak about national pride for a second. So the political left has long falsely equated national pride with fascism or Nazism. There's a point I've harped on before, and I think it's important. It's a common point that they push because this is one of the ways through shame that they undermine Western society. So you need to know how to push back against this, right? So the political left falsely equates national pride with fascism and Nazism. And we have to distinguish between healthy patriotism and toxic nationalism that was fueled by Nazi socialist and Darwinist ideology, right? So Nazis embraced Darwinism. They were Darwinists. So they viewed the struggle between races as a natural law, as Darwin wrote, that sanctioned their violent policies, their genocidal policies. Hitler infused these ideas with mystical nationalism, with mythology, with the crazy mythology of some crazy country and group in the past that, yeah. So, and he reinforced a pseudoscientific racial framework. And this racial framework is directly taken from Darwin, from this guy. And I've covered Darwin at length on my channel. So have a search for Darwin on my channel. So you must understand the distinction between healthy national pride. Let me get these. Sorry. Let me just bring up the second and third ones as well. So national pride promotes trust, cohesion, cultural appreciation, and belonging among citizens. It emphasizes shared values, achievements, fostering civic responsibility, encouraging contributions to society. When you get people who get free handouts, they don't feel that they have to do anything. They don't feel that they have to share in anything. They just get. It's gimme, gimme, gimme. Nazi ideology was Darwinist. It justified scientific racism and genocide. The Nazis claimed a racial hierarchy. They asserted Aryan superiority, and this allowed them to scientifically decide that yes, they have to remove the weaker, inferior races because they were the superior ones. So this led to the systematic extermination of those they deemed inferior, including Jews and Slavic people, the Slavs. That's where I live now. Right. So the Nazis employed Darwin's pseudoscientific social reasoning to frame their actions as natural laws, as Darwin wrote, right, that favored stronger races, using it to justify their genocide. Notice Darwin's book on the origin of species by means of natural selection has a subtitle that is usually removed from the printings of the book. So you won't find this on most covers. It says the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. Who were the favored races? Well, these mythical Aryans that the Germans somehow, the Nazis, had revived. So, and who were the unfavored races? Well, black people, Jews, Slavs, anyone who's not them, basically, right? And so Nazi theorists embraced Darwinism. And we must understand there's a distinction between a healthy national pride and the dangerous ideology of social Darwinism. There's also the claim that Darwin was not a social Darwinist, that it's Francis Galton. No.
Yeah.
Darwin's entire family was social Darwinists. Darwin was the first social Darwinist. He pushed the whole eugenics movement. He believed in the whole eugenics movement. His family were all members and founders and contributors to the eugenics movement. The Nazis simply embraced that. So that is what They embrace this evil Darwinistic idea, and the left wants to distance itself from their own people who embrace these crazy ideas, and they want to use this to demonize normal patriotism. Know the difference, know the history, push back against the lies, defend your country, defend your faith. Thunderous, all yours.
No, there's not really much I can add on to that, Lloyd. I think I pretty much agree with everything that you've said there.
Yeah. Yes, yes. Villainous makes a very good point. I think left whinges about nationalism because they're embarrassed that 1930s Germany was socialist. Yes, but it was a very specific kind of, it was race-based Darwinist socialism based on mythology, based on Darwin's scientific racism and scientific genocide. Darwin provided scientific reason for slaughtering untold millions. Now, the Nazis were stopped. They killed maybe 16 million. But the socialist Soviets, and remember, these were two different forms of socialism that were fighting. They like to claim that no, 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 the National Socialists of Germany were not socialists. Well, first, it is in the name, and two, it was simply non-Marxist socialism. The Nazis and the fascists had a non-Marxist form of socialism, and these socialists went on to murder as many as 200 million people or more over the next century. Thunderous.
Yeah, I mean, we want us to bear in mind that forced sterilization and also abortion are all heavily linked in these in this discussion as well, and that shouldn't be. And so we are living with some of the remnants of these influences in our everyday day-to-day life. I think one of those that's also being spoken of at the moment, but it's been moved forward in Canada to include people with mental illness, but in England via Dignitas, I think it is, with Esther Rantzen as being the face of euthanasia or assisted suicide, as it were, which these seem to be all very much interlinked with each other.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah, we've gone insane. We have gone insane, but we're the sane ones. We're the ones that believe they are men and they are women. They are genetically and biologically different. Men can't have babies. Women have babies. How do you know what a woman is? She can have children, and she's built differently. And these atheists, who are supposedly the rational scientific ones, are the ones that think there are 4,000 genders. Because don't forget, atheists, if you go back 5 or 6 years, you remember there were atheists like the Armored Skeptic and all these others were going, you know, you don't get to define what atheism is, because I get to define what atheism is for me. I can decide my own definition of atheism. I can define my own gender. What's the difference between the two? Nothing really. So there's no fixed definition. You see, I can define this. So that's a slippery slope. So these atheists are now, I get to define my gender because I get to define what atheism is. And it's not what you say it is, because nonsense reasons.
And yeah, I was just saying, on my channel, you'll hear I've got 2 videos up there. One of Richard Dawkins saying that human beings don't have any free will. And the second one is that human beings, as a result of not having any free will, they have no purpose in their life. But the only purpose you have in your life is a subjective purpose that you give yourself. That's a whole discussion in itself, just those 2 videos I've put up there, and maybe sometime in the future Lloyd and myself can discuss that. But if you're following an ideology that basically says you have never made a choice in your life and you are the sum total of chemical reactions in your brain, and that the only purpose you have is your brain fooling you via chemical reactions into deluding you into the purpose you think you have, it goes back to what you're saying there, Lloyd. Then you can pretty much make up what you want with any word that you choose to identify yourself with, or any sex that you identify yourself as.
Yeah, I just want to show people this video. This is a video of the pelvis, right? And this shows a basic biological fact. Men and women have differently shaped pelvises. Now, the two sexes are not the same. There are only two sexes. Maybe you can make up your own gender. You can be cow gender, cat gender, I don't know, water bottle gender, watch gender, heck, whatever. But there are two sexes, right? Because archaeologists, when they look at bodies from 5,000 years ago, they only see two types of bones, male and female. So we have female-bodied females and we have male-bodied males. That's it, period. There's no more. And transgender women are men that cross-dress as females. Now notice this ball is the same size, and this ball being placed into a female pelvis, which is shorter and wider than the male pelvis because babies. And let's have a look. I didn't share the audio. It may or may not come through, but there's no audio. There's no discussion. And that's the male pelvis. But yeah, you were born in the wrong body. Well, yeah, you were. Yeah, so there you go. Men cannot be women because biologically, physically, and Christians are the ones, these irrational Christians. Richard Dawkins needs to understand that the rational, logical Christians can recognize men and women just by looking. I'm damn good at that. How about you, Thunderous? I can recognize men and women just by looking. How about you? Are you that?
Yeah, I'm pretty good at that as well, and I know which one I'm inclined to be drawn to as well. And it certainly isn't the
Yeah.
one with the cock.
I mean, I remember I would know when I was looking at women because the blood would leave my head. It was very simple. Okay, so but apparently today that makes me a bigot. So yeah, but women, yeah, are very different to men because the same ball, this one, there it goes, and for men that's the baby's head. So that ball is the size of a baby's head, and that for men, yeah. So men cannot have babies. Yeah. Over
Well,
to you, Summers.
no, I think that's. I'm not feeling too good at the moment. So I think I'm coming down with something. So if it's okay, I think I'm going to call it a night there. I think we've pretty much covered what we thought we were going to discuss tonight, anyway.
This bot needs discipline. So what is wrong with the bot, Venus? Please let me know. Spamming caps. Okay, don't spam caps. Yeah, Martin. Sorry, my. Okay, I'm gonna change that rule too now because I have a new service. And guys, give me one moment. I'm gonna change the rule on the bot about the caps. Okay, so and I have now removed. Uh, yeah. So okay, so I've changed that, and yeah, let me know how that works now. Right. Yeah. So Thunder's anything else? Then
No. First of all, I just want to apologise to you, Lloyd. What the audience are probably not aware of is that we did have a little dummy run earlier on in the week, and I probably insinuated or alluded to having some slides ready today. So I want to apologise to you for not having any slides ready, or maybe being confused myself. I want to apologise to you for that. So for the listening audience, we've pretty much had to go ad hoc today. It was a shame that Roan couldn't join us today. So hopefully, if you're listening, Roan, we can maybe speak to you another time. And to the rest of the audience, what's left of your weekend, I hope you have a good time.
yeah, perhaps you and I can pick up next week if you're available because I think I have the slot open.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Lloyd, it's always a pleasure to come on your show. So maybe we can maybe interact over the week and maybe formulate a plan for what we're going to discuss next week.
Yeah. Yeah, guys. Just so the new bot was set that if there were more than 30 capital letters in a row, it would trigger the bot and give a 30-second timeout. Something that was the rule. I've just changed it now. So yeah, but it was like with more than 30 caps in a row, it would respond. I've changed the limit. I've tripled the limit now. So yeah, it's a new setup. I've just starting with. So yeah, hopefully I can improve the streams with the new professional studio. So guys, thank you very much for your time. It's been an hour and 14 minutes. We try to go roughly that time when I typically stream. I'll be on tomorrow with Paul Sutcliffe. We're going to be talking about the cancer of civilization jihad. We're going to continue with that. And then of course on Tuesday, I will be talking on another topic. Let me bring that up. I will be talking about the Quranic mushrikun, and I should be joined by Odon, and we want to take a look at who are these mushrikun in the Quran, right? Are they pagans? Are they really pagans? And hopefully I get to explain now finally to myself as well, why is the Quran anti-Trinitarian? Why? And also, why do they hate St. Paul? What they call Paulianity. I think I have an answer to that now. I think I have a good answer to that.
You've
And
You've done that before, haven't you? I remember you doing it. Maybe I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago. You responded
Yes.
to about Islam and its claim that we're Paulians. That's what they call us, don't they? They call us Paulians, and you did a fantastic discussion on that. So yeah, should be good to listen to again.
Yeah. So that was called polemics, but it's not the same. Now I'm going to try and find what is the reason that I think I finally have, because that was about what they had to say about St. Paul. Now I'm trying to undermine why they hate St. Paul, and I think I have the answer. So first I had the crazy crazy views they had. Let me just go here, polemics. So this was the really false, really insanely, laughably strange things that Muslim scholars were saying about St. Paul. But now I think I have a definitive answer as to why they hate St. Paul, why they speak out against him. And that's in the polemic series, is the what they say. Now I think I have why. So Nicodemus says the patriotic Christian fellow couldn't make it from watching he was fighting very serious health issues. Okay, because I tried to reach him and I wasn't able to get through to him or get a response. Okay, I'll get it sorted. Just villainous. I will. My apologies. I will fix this. I have the bot set to minimum. I have it set to minimum rules and absolute minimum. So I will try and tune it or disable. I disabled a couple of those rules already. And Paulianity, what kind of tartar is that? Paulianity is Paul hijacked Christianity. That's the claim. And now I think I know why. And it's got to do, I believe, with paganism. Now, this is not to say that I necessarily have all definitive answers. I have one or two, but what I do have are some questions, some really good questions, I think. And I think we can learn, we can move towards answers. We can clarify or dispel the cloud of confusion that's hovering over the Quran. And I think we have I think we have a few pointers that will really help with us. So guys, Catherine M says, do I find you too annoying? Am I too chatty? No, not at all. No, sorry. If my bot's misbehaving, that's because it's the first day and the very first time I'm using this new bot. I had a different bot before, using a new one, and I need to tune those rules. I am sorry about that if it's if it's been doing this with anyone. So guys, yeah, thank you very much. I will tune the bot, and Thunderous, let's meet in a week. And thank you guys very much, and thank you for your time, Thunderous. God bless everyone.
My pleasure. Bye bye, everyone.
Bye everyone.